is the art scene ticking? Everything we always wanted to know about art. A podcast of Petra Lossen.
Today I'm talking to Josie McCoy. She's a very sympathetic British artist, coming from London, now living in Valencia, Spain. And she paints realistic portraits of fictional characters from the world of film, television and music. She usually works from photographs taken from the film or television screen. In doing so, she uses oil paint like watercolor to build up the paintings in thin layers of very diluted paint that makes the surface of the paintings glow in an imitation of the cinema screen. Josie won several prizes and her works are present in important collections.
Hello, Josie McCoy.
Hi Petra, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, really well, thanks.
Very good. Josie, I'm very, very happy to have you here in our conversation. We know each other for some years already. So what I know is you have bachelor degrees in fine art from Solihull College in Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a master's degree in fine art from the Central St. Martin's College of Art and Design. That's in London.
Yeah.
Do you want to share with us how you got into art?
Yes, I'd love to. I fell in love with art from a really young age, and I had a wonderful art teacher at my school. I went to a comprehensive school in Devon, in southwest of England, and he just really nurtured me and sort of enabled me to spend more time on art, and I did my A-levels there as well. And so he kind of gave me the opportunity of going on a workshop for visually gifted students and just really put all the materials in front of me that I needed at the right time. So I'm really grateful to him. He was called Mr. Dunn.
Mr. Dunn. Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Dunn.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Dunn.
Yeah, he had a good feeling, because you're very successful. Yeah, that's great. I know you're living in Spain right now. Was it something to do with your art career?
It was in a way part to do with my art career, in that I was doing really well with selling my paintings at a certain point. And my boyfriend was a maths teacher in London, and he really did not like living in London. So I said to him, why don't we go and live in Spain for a year? Because it was his dream, his absolute dream to live here. And so I just sort of said, well, I'll give you a year off of life, if you like, because I can, and it's wonderful. And so earlier in my career, when I didn't make any money, he was the one who paid the rent. So it seemed like a fair deal. But then we got here for a year and he would not leave. And it was a bit strange. So we've stayed ever since. But I'm really, really happy here. It's a wonderful place to live. So I kept my studio in London, and I was still showing really prolifically in London at that time. And so I was making the work here, then carrying it back, and then working on works in my London studio, and just making it all work with like really, it's only 2.5 hours flight, it's really possible.
Yeah.
But then later on, when I wanted a family, things had to change because obviously I couldn't go to London so much. So I became full-time here in Valencia.
Yeah, can imagine. And when you started to paint in the beginning of your career, was there a difference to find in your artworks than what we find now? Did they look different?
They were really different. So I started off wanting to be a sort of a photorealist painter. And so I was using green as my underpainting and then putting sort of very rich sort of skin colors on top.
Yeah.
And then it went through a process where I started getting really bored of doing the tones, and I didn't want to keep chiseling that face, So it's always been about faces for me. Yeah. But then I realized that I would have my green underpainting, and then I'd paint the bits I wanted to paint, which was the eyes and the mouth, the parts that I think create the communication in a portrait. And then I just became to love that green background, as it were. So I started sort of painting as though that green was on the surface instead of underpainting. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I eliminated the tone, really.
Yeah.
And I was really happy, much happier. And then so then there's always a gap, isn't there, between what you want your paintings to look like and what you're physically able to do. So it took a long time to really hone that sort of the aesthetic I was creating in my head
Yeah.
I couldn't physically do for a long time. And then as I became more adept at blending or making these very soft edges, it kind of changed the kind of look of the work. So sort of like it was a process of wanting in my head to change my paintings and then physically catching up and like that.
And did the circumstance that you lived in Spain and you sometimes you travel to London, there's a difference in the light. Did this had an influence to your works?
It was massive actually, because the light here is very yellow and the light in London is very blue, or at least in my studios anyway. So I would paint something here because I really love cobalt violet. It's a really interesting color. It really sort of transforms according to light. So what I thought here was like this beautiful dusky purple. So I might add other colors into it to make a dusky purple.
Yeah.
But when it got to London, it would be really bright and it would have a completely different look about it. Yes.
Fantastic. Yeah. So you paint portraits of characters from the world of film, television, and music. First, let me ask you, why from film, television, and music?
It's a great question. I think in sort of historically, paintings were made for rich people. Whereas I didn't want to do that. Because I'm working class, I wanted to make paintings about things that I really engaged with. So my first I would say there was a real breakthrough for me when I was doing my master's at St. Martin's. I painted a load of characters from a soap opera because I was obsessed with a soap opera. And I think there's something quite wonderful about taking a very sort of privileged or sort of high culture medium and painting something that's supposedly low culture. So it's about access, really. It's about sort of art for everybody.
Yeah, that's cool, huh? Good to know. Interesting. Most of your characters are women. Not all, but most of them. Why women?
Well, there's two reasons. One is politically. So again, thinking about art history, the women were painted as sort of passive. They were assumed, they were there for like an assumed male painter and an assumed male spectator. So they were like these passive, quiet things. So I wanted to paint women with more power, basically. Well, I still do. Try and make my paintings have a conversation between them and with the viewer. So when you enter a room full of my paintings, I want there to be a dialogue. And so I'm using the gaze and the way they're sort of hung to create that dialogue. So it's all about the women being active. And the aesthetic level is because men really need cheekbones to look like themselves. Just that sort of the way we are, that women's eyes are proportionally bigger in their faces. And so because I've kind of pared down, I've cut out all of that tone pretty much. I think that my paintings of women are more successful.
Okay. And you want to serve the women.
Yes, I want to champion them as well. It's about that sort of, being proud of being a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your portraits look very tender and light. They look like we are watching a picture of
our own dream.
And you paint in oil, which is a so-called heavy medium. Laura Oldfield Ford is a well-known British artist who draws in ballpoint pen. And she once wrote something very, very beautiful about you. Could you let us know what she wrote?
Yes, I've got it here, actually. So, Laura writes, "The faces of the subjects, almost always women, are the smoothed over and unblemished masks of the global videodrome. There is something of the chimera about them, a haunting. They loom up from the canvas, floating glassy-eyed, impervious to the world they cast their gaze upon. These are the blank stares of the undead, self-renewing, waiting for the fantasies of the viewer to be projected onto them. They are the archetypes of female beauty in a shimmering heterotopia. They persist as a tide of eternal disappointment in what we are and what we aspire to be." It's just beautiful, isn't it?
Just beautiful. Really, I love it.
So I used to share a studio with Laura. So the reason that she wrote this for me, it came from a conversation we had in the studio where she kind of observed that my paintings were kind of almost shimmering. They were like hovering off the surface of the wall somehow.
Yes.
And I really liked that she was so, she'd really understood what I was trying to do. So for me, the most exciting part, or one of the most exciting parts of this, is that when she says about them waiting for the fantasies of the viewer to be projected onto them, because I believe that that's what we're doing when we look at a painting. We're looking at it with our very specific eyes, you know. So
yeah,
especially if I paint a moment from a film, I think if you know the actor, you have a certain level of engagement. If you know the film, more. But if you know that moment, if you felt something
yeah,
in that moment in the same way that I did as the person who painted it, then there's an extra connection to it. But I love the idea that we can cast onto something our own desires, if you know what I mean. And then she goes on to say that about the disappointment is that we obviously fail. There's a failure involved in the whole process, but there's one that it makes it compelling to look again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Right.
And what I see in your paintings is, and especially when we talk together about it, is there is so much love. Am I right?
Yes, that is lovely, isn't it? So, because I have a really wonderful response from my paintings, I have to be honest. So people come into the studio and they feel that.
Yeah.
But I think it's because they are literally stroked into being. Imagine if you were like making up your face when you're putting on your eyeshadow. It's a very similar process.
Yeah.
So I think there's something about that. So I only paint, well, I find it extremely difficult to paint things that I don't want to paint. Obviously, sometimes we have to, but for commissions or whatever, well, very, very, very rarely. I'm really connected with what I do, yes.
Yeah. In 2017, I exhibited 2 paintings from you. That was Donald Trump's daughter and her husband.
So that's an example, Petra, of I really didn't want to paint them because I really don't like them. That's an example of when I painted something that I didn't love, that I didn't want to, but I wanted to make the works for the reasons that we showed together, that it was a really wonderful show. But because they were people that I didn't connect with, it was really hard to paint them, especially the man.
Yeah.
Because I just didn't like him. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Trump's daughter, she looked so soft and sensitive in your painting. I've never seen her in television like this. And I thought maybe she's different, but maybe you just caught a very, very special second of her. And
I think that's what I'm trying to do, actually. Yes.
Yeah.
Which is why I can't paint things that I don't like, because they look like I made them with love.
Yeah.
Politically, I can't bear the idea that people would be confused about my politics, or like that I might adore those people.
Yeah.
So it's problematic. So I had a problem with doing those paintings, but I did them for a good reason. I'm really glad, you know.
Yeah. After years, I get to know this. I didn't know that before. It's interesting.
Yeah, but Paco was quite persuasive, and you know, I think sometimes it's good for us to do those challenges.
Yeah.
But then afterwards, he wanted me to paint Trump as well, and it was the limit. I couldn't do it.
This is sad.
It's fine.
Yeah. But I can imagine. Yeah, it's impossible. But a lady, she wrote a book, and she published it just before the last elections, and I bought it, and we were on holiday, and I was lying in the wellness area reading this book. I must say, I was really, it's really not literature.
Yeah, sure.
Not the subject of the book and not the way she wrote it. But I could believe that it happened like she wrote it. And maybe he's one of these guys
who has
no of these special seconds.
That's right. That would be hard to find. But you're right about I do try really hard. I spend a long time looking for source material, and it is about finding that very special moment. I love that.
Yeah, we talked about what wasn't possible for you. And could you explain us how you find your characters?
Yeah, so it's pretty much what I watch on telly. So a lot of people kind of recommend things to me as well. So I have my own Netflix account, like everybody. But over the years, I've pretty much painted the films I love. I kind of watch them like making paintings in mind, if that makes sense. And a lot of my friends recommend things to me if they've seen a really special film. And then I get kind of obsessed with certain films and I return to them. So my paintings of Lilu, I started in 2004, I think. And I'm still painting them. And it's an ongoing project. I'm on number 15.
Yeah.
And so there are certain moments in films that it's how that moment made me feel that I return to in my life, perhaps. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
And then there are other characters I adore where there's a bit of a confusion or a blur between what's real and what's not real. So Blade Runner is a film I've returned to loads of times as well, where there's a character and we're not sure if she's real or not. And that to me is a really fascinating idea because we're looking at a painting, which obviously isn't real, of something that, again, isn't real. So there's like an echo going on. So so in terms of finding source material, I'm on the lookout all the time. And then when I'm watching things, I just make a note of the episode that I'm watching. I don't stop the telly there and then, but I make a note of that moment and then I return to it and maybe sort of get a load of photographs that I want to work from. And then I print them all out on a really rubbish printer. And then I stick them all on the studio wall. Okay. And so the ones that stay on the studio wall after a couple of weeks, they're the ones I paint.
Okay. And why do they have to stay for a couple of weeks?
Well, because I go off the image. So if I go off the image, I take it off the wall. And the ones that I keep wanting to look at, they stay. And then I realize that they're the paintings I should make. So I'm very slow at painting. It takes about 6 weeks to make a painting. So I've got to be really selective in what I paint.
Yeah. So I
don't want to get bored.
It's good for you that we have Netflix and you can stop the movies.
Yes, well, because in the old days, I used to have my Pentax camera on a tripod in front of the television.
Yeah.
And like literally would...
Oh my God, I can imagine. Oh, but horrible work.
It was horrible. It was so horrible. And then I had an idea. I have this passion to make... So there are 24 frames in a second of film. And it was my passion to do all 24. And trying to do that sort of logistically with an analog camera and an old school video recorder. Oh my goodness. So, but nowadays, yes, it's wonderful. I love it.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you say you save a lot of time?
Yeah, absolutely.
And before the digital cameras, you had to
print out. Yeah. I would go and get them developed.
You go to the shop the time before where you had to go to the shop and then you make the prints.
Yes. And also because it was fine when I was in London because there was like a 1 hour service. It was expensive, but that's, it's part of it all, But when I got to Spain, I would put in a film to be developed and they would say, come back on Wednesday, a week later. So you'd have an idea. I know. Oh, it was. But then, of course, you'd get the prints back. You'd get the photos back. And they would be like a beautiful surprise again.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have to choose. And then you found out it's the right picture here.
Yeah.
What I did.
Yeah. So in the studio, I have boxes of discarded photos that I can't throw away. But there are literally boxes of them that I printed out and just never painted.
You could collect them, make a collage and make an...
I did think, maybe a room full of them could be quite wonderful.
Yeah.
Or horrible.
I know, exactly. Because also, I didn't have good quality televisions or video recorders. So there's a lot of glitches, which is why I keep them actually. I really love the glitch. I don't really want it in my paintings now, but I do love a bit of distortion in a photo. It's beautiful.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
So, and that was how you choose your subjects. And now I would like to know how you paint, how you get these results, that they look so soft, dreamy, you know what
Sure, yeah. So as you can see, I choose my compositions really well. I start the process by using a projector, and I spend a long time deciding exactly where it's going to go. The eyes and the mouth are going to sit on the canvas. And then, so I draw with a pencil, and then I start painting with really diluted paint. I use Shell Sol. It's a sort of an odorless solvent that's similar to turpentine, and it's just wonderful. So I don't have to put up with the fumes while I'm painting in this way. And then I sort of I try and do the whole layer in one, because there's such flat areas, it really doesn't work if I do it bit by bit. So I tend to do a whole layer of very thin paint, and then I wait for that to dry, and then I do another whole layer. And so that keeps going until, and just building up that surface. And I think that's where those very soft lines come. So I'm painting with very wet paint at the beginning. And then I use a very big, soft brush, very clean brush to sort of diffuse everything. So that's where those lovely softness things come from.
Yeah.
Then I work on just the eyes and the mouth and bring them up to like a stronger, I'm using very dry paint for that, or sort of not very diluted. And then, but after each layer, because I let it dry, then I think that it kind of creates this sort of layering, almost like a glazing technique, really. And that's what makes them sort of glow when I'm finished.
How much time does it need until?
Yeah, and that's really interesting. That's another real big change from when I lived in London to Spain, because here it's so humid, it takes a lot longer. So I tend to I use a fan to just keep the air moving if I'm on a deadline. But it takes normally 4 days for it to be dry, because it's very thin. Each layer is very thin.
Yeah.
So I wait 4 days, and then I can paint again. But I can tell as soon as I start painting, I can tell it's not quite dry enough, because the paint underneath starts lifting off, and then it's a disaster.
Okay.
And everything. So then I just stop,
Yeah, I can imagine. Oh my, then you need to restart the whole process.
That's right. That's what I do. Yeah. I if a painting doesn't go well in those first layers, there's just no point in carrying on. I'll spend longer trying to correct it and I don't enjoy correcting painting. I enjoy painting them.
Yeah.
I don't abandon many, but a fair few.
Yeah. And did you always have the plan to paint in this way, or was it kind of development?
Yeah, it's a development, a bit like I was saying earlier about how your desires of what you want to paint changes with your ability, and how you bring up one then the other. I couldn't go back and paint again the ones I did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So it really has developed with time. And also I think with quality of material. So I use really lovely materials. Whereas at the beginning, I really didn't. I didn't know they existed, the lovely quality ones. So that makes a big difference as well.
Yeah.
Is there anything else in your pictures for us to understand, or you want to tell us?
I want them to connect with them, yes. So I think it's all about us kind of feeling something for that character, or that the character's sort of mirroring us.
Yeah.
So I want them to be connected with or engaged with, but not in a didactic way. When I first started painting, when I was doing my degree, I was all about sort of very feminist ideas first, and then paintings around, like in response. I think that's just in my work, and I don't need to shout about it so much, you know?
Yeah, it's about the feelings, huh?
Yeah, but I also want that to be an ongoing process. So I've got lots of paintings in my house of other people's,
Yeah.
And I think they transform your day. You look at them and you are transformed. It sort of elevates your life in some way. I want to do that too.
I always had this experience when you do an exhibition in a gallery and you stay with these paintings for 4 or 6 weeks or even longer, then the situation and the relationship changes.
It's true, isn't it? Yes.
Yes, absolutely. They do something to me.
They do, and they change. The way you look at them changes, I think.
Exactly. And what you
It's wonderful.
Yeah, that's right. And if an artwork doesn't do it, then I would say it's not a good one.
Yes.
I haven't had the situation, luckily.
And also sometimes I think artworks in relation to other artworks have a transformative effect as well. So something on its own can not quite make the mark, but next to something else, there's like a bounce or a tension or some kind of connection between two artworks. That can be quite exciting, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, but recently I've just done 2 solo shows. And so basically, literally everything that was in my studio was suddenly out of the studio on walls. And it was really refreshing. So I just felt I could really breathe. So that's quite exciting as well, to have white walls of nothing as a place to think. It was really lovely.
Yeah. Do you paint also a big size, like 1.5 meters or 2 meters?
Yes, I don't do that many because I'm quite small and I find it difficult to move them around.
Yeah.
And also because I still pretty much sell outside of Spain. So logistically, that gets quite difficult. But I did do 2 paintings that were 2 meters 20 wide, and I'm so proud of them. But I literally could barely lift them. And luckily, I did them in London, and I made them the biggest that could fit through the studio doors.
Yeah.
It was glorious to paint, but then and I was really happy that I sold them because they really took up the space.
Yeah, and you don't get them off the frame?
Yeah, I think I could do that. I would do that if I sold something really large here. I've got a few big ones here. Yeah. The biggest I can lift is 135 centimeters. So that's my arm span. Yeah. And then I think, it would be more sensible to put it on a tube or in a tube.
What was the subject of one of the big?
Oh, it's Penelope Cruz in Bull Bear. It's another film I've painted loads of times. It's all about a Spanish family. Yeah. And it's just really a poignant, beautiful moment. Yeah. And I've painted loads of times, but this one it's my best painting yet, I think. I'm really proud of it.
Okay. I can feel that you're in love with it. Did you ever get a reaction by a celebrity you painted?
I have, yes. Well, my first paintings were of the EastEnders cast, as I mentioned, which is that soap opera. And the BBC came and bought the whole show. They bought my master's show. Yeah. And that was wonderful, actually, because that freed me up to make more art. And I think it was quite a pivotal moment in my career. It bought me time to make more art and be able to do more shows. And I've had a big connection with the BBC in England because they also commissioned me to paint a work for EastEnders to go on the wall in an episode. Uh-huh. And they also commissioned me to do one of the really important characters, Pat Butcher, her leaving present. So that's been a really exciting connection, actually, and really validating. Yeah. And yes, and I think people always say, "Oh, you should show that to Billie Eilish," and I go, "Well, yeah, sure, of course," But it's quite difficult to actually show that painting to Billie Eilish.
Just call
even in Instagram.
Just call her and ask her, "Could you give me your address? I will send you something."
That's right. Yes, probably all of my friends have her number.
And in Instagram, did you get a reaction?
Well, that's true. Yes. So Instagram, I've been a lot more. I've been using Instagram quite a lot the last 2 years. I was a bit slow to start with it, but it's great. And it really does show your work to people who love things So I kind of, if I do a painting, I will tag a couple of fan sites, and I get wonderful response, because those are the people I think who really genuinely want to see paintings of their favorite person.
Yeah. I just started with this podcast to concentrate on Instagram. So I'm fresh and new, but I learn how it's working. And in Facebook, my feeling is that the people are, they're talking in a bad way. And I really don't like what Facebook shows me out of all my contacts. My feeling is it's all just advertisement or whatever, but nothing I am interested in. So I'm, I think.
Well, I've kind of put a split on it. So I've got Facebook is for friends and for groups. I do actually really like the groups, because being foreign here, obviously there are loads of things. There's a lot of information you're always lacking if you're not from a place. And so I'm part of a few groups, and they really do fill in the gaps. So that's quite nice.
Right. Yes, that's right. Yes, that's right.
But Instagram, I just think, is a really joyful place. And I know I don't think many people agree with me. I don't know, but I've got friends who really don't agree.
Till now, I am in the beginning with my experiences, but till now, I must say, I like it, because my feeling is that we can handle how it works for us. And
yes.
And Facebook, I don't have this feeling. And also LinkedIn changed. So I have around 6,500 followers in LinkedIn. Some years ago, when I posted something,
I get a huge number of reactions.
And likes and discussions started and so on. And now it's just a few. And I have to really send personal messages also to each single person. And that's
really. Yeah.
I miss the old times.
Yes, that's it. Because it's called social media for a reason, isn't it? It's to be social. But I think like LinkedIn didn't work for me because I accepted too many so-called connections or friend requests from people I didn't know. And now it's just a mess, and I need to just tidy it up. And it's one of those tasks that just never gets done. So I should probably just come off and then go on again with like a bit more conscious connecting.
Maybe I just didn't understand the algorithm they now use. Maybe I will.
But you're right about Instagram, because Instagram responds to what you put in.
Exactly.
So I was really careful so all my friends, I can see what they're up to on Facebook, but Instagram I use it solely for art, and I have a really lovely feed. I see wonderful things every day,
How about series? Do you paint in films and then this is a series, or what is the situation with this?
Yeah, so I do paint in series. So I either respond to an exhibition title, as an example, where I'll do, so for example, one show I did years ago was called Don't You Forget About Me, which is a song that's the title track to a film called The Breakfast Club. And it was a really important film for me when I was growing up, a real lovely film. And I painted all of the characters from that film. So that was one series sort of thing. But then in more recent years, I tend to paint in imagining the final exhibition. So I kind of create like a balance within the colors, within the space.
Yep.
And so if I paint two people looking that way, I'll paint someone looking the other way to give them something to talk to, So each painting I do responds to the last one. And also for if I've got lots of time, so if I know, for example, now that I'm going to show in a certain size space in July next year, I would make that show. So it was like a coherent body of work.
Yeah. Could you imagine to paint two characters on one painting?
I've tried it. It's a recipe for disaster. So I painted one massive painting and it had 3 characters. And I did the first one. It was beautiful. I did the second one. Fantastic. Third one, really terrible. And it was like, I'd invested so many hours, like literally so many hours into the first part of the painting that I just had to get it right. And I did in the end, but it took me a year to get that painting to be good.
Oh,
Yeah, so I think it's much better to do one at a time.
to do what you can.
Yeah, exactly. But also I think, so in the past, I've sort of almost spliced together two images from one film. You know, when you want to create a narrative between two characters, but then not actually in the same moment of the film.
Yeah.
And it's really tricky because even though I'm not using direction or light, there are telltale signs that the light source is from a different place. It could be like the dots in the eyes, or somehow the side of the mouth is a little bit lighter. Yeah. So it's a really tricky operation, actually. So I don't do it often.
Yeah. How about your upcoming plans?
Right. So I've got a few things in the pipeline. So, for example, I'm going to do a group show for Women's Day in London. And I'm talking with a curator about a show in Portugal, but nothing's actually in the diary.
Yeah.
But what I'm really excited about is that in the new year, I have plans for a new series that I don't want to talk about the actual series, but just that I have this lovely idea that I'm kind of bursting to get started with. Because this year it's been a really good year for showing, like an exceptional year for showing. I showed in a castle, which was amazing. And I've been showing in public spaces here in Spain, which is a real breakthrough for me. And I also got into the Royal Academy Summer Show, and I'm doing a lovely show in Hastings. So it's been exciting in that way. But I spent a lot of time doing show preparations and admin stuff and commission. So I feel from January the 1st, I'm just a painter again. Yeah. And I'm honestly really excited about it.
Yeah.
Josie, thank you so much that you've been part of this episode, that we could talk about these interesting things in a very sympathetic way. And I hope all your wishes come true, and I hope the next year will also be a healthy and a successful year for you.
Oh, no, it's been an absolute pleasure. And this is my first ever podcast, so thank you.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you and all the best.
How is the art scene ticking? Everything we always wanted to know about art. A podcast of Petra Lossen.